With the Senate voting to pass a continuing resolution 3 hours before a 12:01 a.m. shutdown, questions still linger about the repercussions regarding this near shutdown and whether Speaker McCarthy is equipped to handle his job. Joining me now, host of A More Perfect Union podcast, Dr. Nii Quarterly-Quartey, and back with me, a special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast. Thank you both very much for being here. Molly, I just want to give you a chance, because in the last two blocks, we were talking about the threats that Donald Trump is making to American democracy and how he is making the moves to fulfill the promises he's making. And one of the things is how the press is covering this campaign. Let me get your final thoughts on that before we talk about the mess that is the speakership of Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, just quickly, I think there's a lot of false equivalencies in the way we're covering Trump in the mainstream media. This is more true for people who are just sort of straight reporters versus on the opinion side. Mm-hmm. But, look, conservatives have worked the refs when it comes to media, and a lot of mainstream media worries that they're appearing too liberal by stating the actual facts. And so you see situations like, I saw a headline the other day, Biden's age is a big problem and Trump has some problems too, right? Like that should never happen. And I think we just have to be so much more careful. Trump needs to be covered as the autocrat he is, and we know he will be.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about what we just averted for the next 45, or as OMB Director Shalanda Young said, it's 47 days, and that is the shutdown. We know from this morning, Congressman Matt Gaetz said that he is going to file a motion to vacate the Speaker when they come back into session tomorrow. Also, Congresswoman from New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has said that she will vote in favor of that motion to vacate. Dr. Quartey, where does McCarthy go from here?
Well, I think Speaker McCarthy has to do the honorable thing. I think what Shalanda Young shared this morning means honoring the deal that was previously made. Get that done as soon as possible so they can move on to other things. But, look, Democrats really did Speaker McCarthy a solid. They saved the Speaker. They saved this country from having our full faith and credit called into question. And so the question is, what do Democrats want from the Speaker in exchange for saving him yet again?
And, Molly, I can't help but think about the chaos that we're seeing in the House majority, where, to Dr. Quartey's point, the Democrats keep saving Speaker McCarthy's bacon. They saved it during the debt ceiling crisis early in the summer. They did it again yesterday in terms of voting in favor of the continuing resolution that led to averting a government shutdown. But how long can this chaos last?
Well, the problem is now you have a question of, will they keep him Speaker, right? So will Democrats keep him Speaker, or will they vote for this motion to vacate? By the way, if they vote for this motion to vacate, Matt Gaetz does not have the votes to install a new Speaker. So what will happen? Will we have no Speaker again? I mean, this is look, Matt Gaetz is acting on the behest of Donald Trump. I think that's an important top line here, right? Donald Trump had wanted a government shutdown, and he had begged for a government shutdown. What I think is pretty interesting is that in old times, pre-2020, Kevin McCarthy would have shut down the government just because Donald Trump told him to. And this time he didn't. So I think that is a really important data point. But again, Democrats are going to have to decide whether they want to save him. And the question is, what can they get from Kevin McCarthy?
Mm-hmm. Well, should they, Dr. Quartey? I mean, should they save Kevin McCarthy?
Well, in saving Kevin McCarthy, we're also saving a lot of the priorities that Democrats cherish, a lot of priorities that Democrats were sent to Congress to champion. And so, there's a dysfunction we know, and there's a dysfunction that we don't know. And so without a Speaker McCarthy in place, who knows, who might muster enough votes to become Speaker, and who knows how much more beholden they might become to the most extremist faction of House Republicans. I mean, it's important to note, just to connect the dots, Jonathan, that political extremism is on the rise in our country. And I think what we've seen with this game of chicken related to the government shutdown is just another example of that extremism.
Right. I mean, Molly, that's why I call them the House Majority, the Chaos Caucus. I mean, yeah. It's one thing to have a rump faction of your majority wreaking havoc and saying all sorts of things. It's another to bend to their will. And so if when the debt ceiling deal was set, I thought, wow, Kevin McCarthy was able to get this done, avert the nation going over a financial cliff, and he was going to emerge stronger than ever because he stared down the far right of his party. And yet here we are looking at a speaker who is even weaker than he was during that nonsense. And with the motion to vacate, even if he survives, he'll be even weaker still. So what does that say about the governance of this country going forward?
Well, and I think more importantly, what does it say about Kevin McCarthy, right? He's just not that good at this. And I think, like, if you think about Nancy Pelosi, she had as small a majority or maybe slightly larger, and she never had problems like this. I mean, the problem with Kevin McCarthy is you cannot have a House Speaker who cannot count, right? I mean, he keeps taking votes to the floor that fail, rules votes that are not supposed to ever fail. And I think that his inability to do the sort of small, granular stuff that is the job has really undermined him. Again, I think you're right. There is this chaos caucus, this group that wants to burn it all down. And Kevin McCarthy really has handed them the keys to the kingdom. And they are really just running roughshod. And that's Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. And I think we'll see more of that.